New on Morning Plus at 9:08 this morning, Kent County has lost more than 13,000 acres of farmland in just 5 years, and local farmers say the pressure from development isn't slowing down. Now, there's a new county program, or a county program we should say, aimed at protecting farmland, and it's getting a boost thanks to fundraisers at Culver's restaurants across Kent County. Joining us this morning, Denny Heffron, a local farmer and the chair of the Agriculture Preservation Board, and Haley Stitchman, the Community Development Coordinator with Kent County. We appreciate you both for being here this morning. For those who don't know what this fundraiser is going to, again, it's this fund that we've been talking about. What is that fund? Why is it important?
Yeah, so the fund is the Agricultural Preservation Fund. This is at the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. This fund supports agricultural preservation county-wide, so Kent County. It supports programs like the Purchase of Development Rights Program, which is a voluntary program that compensates owners for agreeing not to develop their land. So it places a conservation easement, which is a permanent deed restriction on the land, so the land can't be used for anything besides agriculture.
Okay, so it kind of safeguards farming land or agriculture land as a whole from being developed. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, very interesting stuff. And Denny, I want to get to you because you're a farmer. You know this industry like the back of your hand. What is it that farmers are facing in today's climate? What are you guys facing? Why is this important?
Well, the loss of farmland, and farmland is the foundation to our food supply. And without that, it'll impact our food supply down the road. So yeah, it's very important. Our family has farmed in Grattan Township for 105 years now.
Wow.
And we've seen big changes.
What are some of those big changes that you have seen over your lifetime? What are some of the biggest changes, would you say?
Well, the thing that really hits me is, and we look at the land and the prime land, the land that will grow the best crops and the most efficiently and all that. And when I see farms that we have farmed that are now covered with houses, and it's prime farmland. Now, we have a lot of land that's not prime farmland where the houses ought to be. And so this program preserves that prime farmlands for future generations, forever.
Yeah, and so you're talking about some farmland that might be more appropriate, or land that might be more appropriate for development. How do you go about determining that? And, I know that that's probably not an easy way or an easy tell to be able to determine something like that, but how do you go about looking at that and saying, that's better than this land?
Well, a farm, when they apply, it first starts out at the township level, and the township has to have master planned it for farmland, or if it's master plan for development, that we don't preserve it. So the township really, right at the local level, determines if it's suitable or should be preserved or not. Interesting.
So do they consult farmers like yourself to kind of look at that land and kind of pick and choose which one would be better?
Yeah, there's a number of things. USDA, their soils is looked at, prime soils, and there's a lot of factors. There's a scoring process that they go through to determine if this is a farm that ought to be preserved or not. If it's planned for development, has infrastructure in that, they don't preserve it.
And it's interesting because I think people just see the farmland and they're like, oh, it's just farmland out there, you could just develop it. It's not always the case. So, how did this fund get created? What is the goal of the fund, and why did you guys think you needed to start a fund like this?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so the fund was created, or the program was created in 2002, so it's been around for a while. The fund was created through an endowment. It was really a time when, we were looking at sprawl happening. So when you talk about how do you determine where farmland should stay and where development should happen, we look at things like where is infrastructure. And so we want to keep, development where there's infrastructure, water and sewer, and be able to reduce sprawl and keep our farmland. So when we looked at how much acreage is being lost, you talked about 13,000 acres over 5 years. if you looked at the previous 5 years, you'd see that there was still a decrease in farmland. So I think when you look at that trend of decreasing farmland, there were individuals within the county that really saw the need to preserve that farmland.
Yeah.
Farmland not only supports growing the food, but it also supports the processors and producers that are within Kent County. If we didn't have the farmland to grow the apples, we wouldn't have those processors and baggers in Kent County, which is ultimately the agricultural sector as a whole.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when talking about what the program does, can you talk about what selling development rights means and how that goes to protect farmland?
Yeah, so I talked about conservation easement. A lot of people might not exactly understand what that term means. So when we dive into it, it's a deed restriction. So it restricts the ability to develop the land. So the county compensates through state and federal grant funds. So when we go through and we're awarded state and federal grant funds, we're allowed to purchase the development rights. And so that means that if we purchase the development rights, we compensate that fair market value to the landowner. They still retain all the private property rights. They can continue to farm the land. They can sell that land down the road and receive that additional compensation for the agricultural value. But it just means that that land is protected forever. It needs to remain farmland.
But yeah, protected to be farmland.
To be farmland.
And so when we're talking about this fundraiser that's coming up next week, this is going to, it's about what, 10% of all sales at the Kent County Culver's locations going to go to that program. Talk about how that's going to help this.
Yeah, so that that can supply the ability for us to have some additional matching funds to purchase the development rights. There's also closing fees that take place when we go through this process, as well as time and the energy that it takes. So all of those funds will go directly into that agricultural preservation fund with Grand Rapids Community Foundation, and it'll be used to support the PDR program. Kent County has some additional initiatives that it's working on as well to preserve farmland. The Agricultural Preservation Board is really diving into what are some of the other big things that are impacting the agricultural sector, and how might the county and the Agricultural Preservation Board provide support. So, things like succession planning. We know that farmland is most at stake when it changes hands. And there are a lot of older generations that are still farming. So if we don't have those succession plans in place, if those farmers don't, then we might see an increase in the amount of land that's being lost to development potentially. So succession planning is another way that we can preserve our farmland.
Very interesting. Again, very important for those at home or who are wondering, how does this relate back to me? And what is that end result for the people of Kent County? Farmers, of course, this is a good thing. We can all see that. But if you're talking about the person on the other side of this screen that is watching, why should they care about this?
Well, one small example is eggs.
Yeah.
Everybody knows McDonald's and their Egg McMuffin. If you buy an Egg McMuffin east of the Mississippi, it's a Herbrook egg. And Herbrooks are located just outside of Kent County. A lot of the grain from Kent County goes to Herbrooks to feed the chickens. Most people don't realize that the impact that Egg McMuffin had, and that's just one little example.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We just had McDonald's. We just had a staff meeting, and we had McDonald's for breakfast. We were bought that. So very interesting. So something that would clearly impact us as well.
Yeah, it goes back to the community aspect of this. Making sure to have that community support too is of course extremely important to make sure that farmlands are protected. Everything that goes into this. Can you also talk a little bit more about how, in the long term, this is something that everybody should really take into account?
So often we think short term, and this is for generations. People keep asking me, you preserve this forever, and I say, well, as soon as people quit eating, we won't need it. But I don't see that coming.
Yeah, I don't see that happening either. Yeah.
But it's really important. And the thing that'll happen is as we slow down in production, and that somebody else is going to pick it up. And most often that is foreign imports that will pick it up. And we already have a fair amount of that's happening already, where we're importing our food. And I'm not sure the American consumer wants their food imported.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because we know that Kent County is a rapidly developing county. There has to be growth in some ways. I would think that some people on the developer side would argue that. Can you talk about how you can balance that, though?
Yeah.
Is there a balance there? How do we continue to develop but also preserve farmland for our consumers at home?
Yeah.
That, is very good, and it's really important, because if we don't have the balance, we got a problem. And there's room for everybody, and that's where it starts out at a township level. And a township determines where they want to develop, where they want to preserve, and that. And so it's working together, and there's room for everybody, but it's going to take work and planning.
Yeah, let's talk about the fundraiser one more time. Let's put the graphic back up on the screen, because this is happening next Tuesday. Tell us about the fundraiser, and if people are just joining us, where's that going toward, and how can they help?
Yeah, so the fundraiser is Tuesday, June 24th, 5 to 8 p.m. We have 10 participating locations. All of those Culver's locations are within Kent County, and they can come in, they can dine in, they can go through the drive-through. We're also looking for volunteers, so if anyone is interested in volunteering, they can reach out, go to kentcountymi.gov and search for purchase of development rights, and they can find more information there. People can expect to have volunteers on site. They can learn more about the program. Denny has been working to secure tractors from John Deere.
Yeah, we were wondering about that.
Yes, so there will be tractors on site that people can anticipate seeing.
What do you think that does for somebody if they're going to see the tractor on site? Do you think it just kind of builds the excitement?
Well,
Yeah.
little kids will be able to climb up in the tractor, get their picture taken and all that. And John Deere's a big sponsor also. Culver's has been just terrific. But John Deere this year has joined in too.
Very cool. Two more questions for you. If we can't make it out to the Tuesday fundraiser, how can we also support the local farm community, or maybe even the program?
Yeah, so we do have the ability to donate directly to the Kent County Agricultural Preservation Fund with the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. So people can find more information about that on our website.
Okay, and farming community, how can folks at home support the farmers?
Well, many ways. A lot of townships are also participating in the programs and putting funds into the program. Many of the townships are doing that. And so there's a lot of different ways, like I said, it starts out at the township level. The townships play a big part in this, in determining. So it isn't somebody sitting behind a desk saying, this can be preserved and this can't, So townships play a big part, and they're stepping up and contributing also.
Well, very nice. Were you going to sit it?
Well, I was going to say, there should be a big John Deere in front of every Culver's restaurant.
Okay.
So when you see a big John Deere, you'll know you're at the right spot.
There you go.
Do we need to say anything, say I'm here for the fundraiser, or is it just
Nope.
everything?
All the proceeds.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, very cool. Well, you can have your Culver's dinner next Tuesday, and also support local farmers as well at Culver's locations across Kent County. Again, 5 to 8 p.m. on Tuesday. 10% of sales that night go toward the program. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right.